In this episode, I will talk about my edge correction technique for this project. There are numerous solutions for edge correction, and it all depends on the background and lighting conditions in question. In my case, I just extended the color pixels of my subject slightly outwards to get the desired look. The issue we currently have is that there is this border of dark pixels and a white halo which is caused by the rim light, which is not going to look good when composited. To mitigate this, we begin with the main key that we previously generated as shown in the previous episode. We erode this slightly and then multiply with the despilled foreground to get something like this in the bottom right corner. This result is blurred quite a bit, as you can see here, to get this sort of color and alpha output. The blurred image is then divided by itself so that any pixel that has an opacity value between 0 and 1 gets a value of 1, essentially a hard matte with no transparency. Then we take the negative alpha, which is slightly blurred and eroded, and multiply this with our previous result to get our edge extension pixels. It is this output that we merge over the despilled image to get the result on the top left. This is then pre-multiplied with the original alpha, or in my case the alpha after adding the hair detail. That got us the final result, which, as you saw in the promo, a decent result for the background that was used. So let's look at the node tree of this setup. On the left here we have the bad edges, and on the right is our final cleaned up result. To get from here to there, we start with our alpha from the previous episode, which is just a channel boolean where we copied the alpha result from our keyers into the RG and B channels. This node branches out into three ways, as you can see here. The first branch is our erode branch, which does our eroding. The result is then multiplied with our despilled image, which was created using the matte control node with the settings that you can see here on the right in the inspector. Basically just despilled using green and well done, and that should do it. The multiplication is done again using the channel booleans, as you can see here. The 2 alpha is irrelevant in this case, so I just use red FG, but it can be anything. So we're basically taking our despilled, multiplying it with the alpha, so we get that cut out, everything else gone. Next, we blur this output by quite a bit on all channels to get this result. 12 something worked fine for me. You just need to make sure that alpha is selected, as I think it isn't by default. I added a brightness contrast node in case I need to adjust how far I want the alpha to go out, but for my purpose I didn't have to touch it. It's just a placeholder. Now to the divide node, which is another channel boolean node with these settings. Basically dividing by alpha of itself in all channels. This is also called unpre-multiply. The red, green and blue channels are going to be more or less the same because you get fraction values, but with alpha, where they're translucent pixels, you get a value of 1, making it fully solid. So that's how you get this effect. Next, I took another channel boolean node, but this time used the negative function to achieve the inverse of my alpha, and the rest is as explained previously in the slides. The brightness contrast node controls the extent of softness or hardness, and once these are merged, a mask was created to exclude the face, because there's no issues with the face edges, and the current blur would ruin the face and the pigtails. So that's all for edges. We'll look at the hair next. Here is our hair key setup. So what we do first is we input our despilled footage into a brightness and contrast node, which is used to bump up the saturation and contrast so we have a bit of a pop going on, and it's helps separating the hair strands from the background, as you can see here. And that is fed into the luma keyer, and the luma keyer has options to use different values. I'm using red because it has given me the most information, and blues and greens don't give me anything. Like if I change this now to green, blue, nothing is changing in the hair area. Blue obviously has a lot of the other alpha, but red is doing just fine for our purpose. So the next thing to do is to find the sweet spot with the threshold. These values of low and high gave me a really good starting point, but I need to also maintain this throughout the footage where the lighting changes, which means I need to animate this slightly in certain parts of the footage to make sure that it works well throughout. And then this goes into a channel boolean where I'm just subtracting by the alpha foreground, and this is basically subtracting from the original alpha that we had previously. I don't know why this is coming from there. I could have used this. Let's just see if I could have used that. Yeah, it's the same thing. So so yeah, they're both the same. So it's coming from somewhere else, but the concept is that you take the original alpha, subtract it, and you get a nice hair edge, and this is then used to add back to the original alpha. So now you have the original alpha plus the hair alpha, which we got here on the left, combined together here on the right. But this is not final. Obviously we need to get rid of all the other stuff, and that's where the matte control comes in. And all it does is it takes this as your foreground, the key, and then it also takes the original alpha as background, because the original alpha does not have any of the other garbage. So that goes into the background, and this is added to the foreground, and the operation we use is simple combine alpha copy, and that just gives us the result. And obviously if we did not plug these splines in, you still get those back. So really the difference maker is these splines. So we need to say we want to combine the alpha, we want to combine only parts of the foreground into the background, and that's what these splines help decide. So there's one spline, B spline there, one B spline for the right side, one B spline for the left, and then there are a couple more there, and then finally there's one that gets this little edge there. So ultimately it's all about combining and subtracting multiple mattes until you get this final matte, which is nice and clean, and that can be used as a mask or as the final mask. And yeah, this is what was fed into the earlier merge that we saw, and then we have this with nice clean edges, and then finally we get our image there. That's it for keying. In the next video I'll come up with another topic, so until then it's goodbye.